Hi friends, I'm Parvez and welcome to my new course on working with Python and ElectronJS. Now before starting our main topic, if you want to support me, you can support me on my Patreon page. I have added the link in the video description. Now what we are going to build in this course, so we are going to just build a simple GUI application using ElectronJS and also Python backend. So first we are going to build our backend and using Flask, Python web framework, and after that we are going to integrate that with ElectronJS, and we want to build a GUI desktop application. Now this will be so we will make this. Now first let me just show you the functionality of this. So for example, I'm going to just add this is the new data for testing, and we can just say this is our new description. Now if I click on the save, so you can see that the data is added in here, our new data. Now if I check my backend and Flask, you can see that we have our new data in here. Now for example, I want to update this data, so I can just click on the update, and in here I can just say updated, and this is also updated. And if I click on the save, so you can see that this is updated. So this is updated and this is updated. Now if I check my Flask backend, this is also updated. Now we can delete the data, so we can just click on this and you can see that the data is deleted. We don't have the data in here. And if I refresh my Flask backend, you can see that we are not seeing the data in here. Now let's get started. Now let's create our backend API. For this we need to install some libraries. So the first one is Flask. As you know, it's a simple framework for building complex web application, and it's Flask is a lightweight GUI web application framework. It is designed to make getting started quick and easy. So now Flask is a micro web framework, and it's powerful. After Django, it's the second most popular web framework for Python programming language. Now first of all, you need to install Flask. You can just use pip install Flask, and in here, so I've already created a virtual environment, and you can just say pip install Flask. And after installation of the Flask, we need another extension or library that's called Flask SQLAlchemy, and it's an extension for Flask that adds support for SQLAlchemy to your application. And it aims to simplify using SQLAlchemy with Flask by providing useful defaults and extra helpers. So we need to install this, and we can just copy this and pip install Flask SQLAlchemy. So after installation of the SQLAlchemy, because we are using MySQL database, then we need to install MySQL client. Now you can set up Flask SQLAlchemy with different databases like Postgres, SQLite, MySQL database, and particularly we want to use MySQL database. Now for that you need to install MySQL client. So we can just say pip install MySQL client, and now we are waiting for this. Okay, Flask SQLAlchemy has been installed. Now MySQL client, and after MySQL client we need to install Flask Marshmallow. Now it is Flask Marshmallow is a thin integration layer for Flask, and Marshmallow is an object serialization or deserialization library that adds additional features to Marshmallow, including URL and hyperlinks fields. So because before sending the data to the front end, we need to serialize the data. For that we are going to use Flask Marshmallow. So we can just use pip install Flask Marshmallow for the installation. Also because we are using SQLAlchemy, also it's good to install Marshmallow SQLAlchemy. And okay, now the installation has been completed. Now let's create our first Flask application. So I've created a folder at the name of backend, and here I'm going to just create a new file and I'm going to just call it app.py. So the first thing is that we need to import Flask. So we can just say from Flask we are going to import Flask. Now after doing this, we need to create the object of the Flask. So we can just say Flask and we can pass underscore name like this. Okay, now let's create our route. So we can just say app.route. Now if you don't know about the Flask, I have a complete 4 hours training on Flask web development. I have added the link to the video description, you can just check it. So we're going to just use index and we can just give methods. Now by default, if you don't give any method, that's get. So but we want to give it explicitly. And after that we're going to just say def get, or for example we can just say def get articles. Now we can just first we need to import JSONify. So JSONify, and in here we can return JSONify and we can just say hello world. Now if you're using Flask as a full stack, then in here you can render your template, but because we are using Flask just as our backend, so for right now we are going to just say return this hello world. Now after doing this, now we need to run our Flask application. So in here we can just say underscore name underscore main, and we can just say app.run, and we want to make the debug to true. Now if you're in the production level, then you don't need to add this. Because we are in the development mode, we can just make the debug to true. Now there are different ways that you can run your Flask application in Visual Studio Code. The easiest way is that we can just, in here we can just press F5, and from here we can choose Flask, and you can just copy the backend path, that where your app.py is located, and you can just paste it in here, and after that hit enter. Now we are waiting for the running of the Flask application, and you can see it will run in the debug console. It will run the Flask application, and we can just wait for this. So now you can see it running on this local host. Now let's just check this, and we can just say localhost port 5000, and now you can see that we have hello world in here. Now if I change this to get, you will see that I am receiving an error, because right now the route is changed and it's not index, it's for example get. So you can give it whatever you want, but for example in here I want it should be get. Now if I check this, so now you can see that not found, and if I go to the get, you can see that we are receiving hello world. Now let's just test this with the postman, and I'm going to just copy and paste it in here. So the method is get, and we can send. So now you can see that we are receiving hello world in here. And now we want to create our database and table. So as I've already said that we are using MySQL database. So for that I'm using WAMP server, and I have opened my phpMyAdmin, and in here I'm going to create a new database. So you can just call it whatever. So for example I'm going to just call it, for example, Flask, or we can just say Flask backend, we can just say Flask. So after that click on the create. So now you can see that database is created. Right now there is no table in this database because we want to create the tables using SQLAlchemy. So now let's just create our table. So the first thing is that we need to import the SQLAlchemy. So we can just say from Flask SQLAlchemy import SQLAlchemy. And now let's create this in here. We need to add our configuration. So the first one is we can just say app.config, and in here we can just say SQLAlchemy database URI. Okay, now in here you need to choose what database you want. So if you see the SQLAlchemy documentation, there are different databases. You can see that this is the database URI that you need to add. So let me just make it like this. So SQLAlchemy database URI, and after that, if you come down, you can see that there are different databases, Postgres, MySQL, and they have different configuration. So we can just copy this and we can add this in here like this. So this is the MySQL. For example, if you're using SQLite, you can change this to SQLite, or Postgres, you can change this to Postgres. So in my case, it's MySQL. I'm choosing MySQL. After that, you need to give the username, so that's root, and I don't have any password for that, so I can just leave it blank. This is localhost, and this is the database name, that is Flask. Also, we need to just add another configuration, even though it's not important, but if you don't add this, you'll receive a warning. And in here we can just say track. So track, and we can just say modifications. So SQLAlchemy track modifications, and we want to make this to false. So now we have created our configuration, and after doing this in here, we can just say db SQLAlchemy, and we need to pass the app in here. Now it's time to create our table. Right now we have our database, our Flask database, but there is no table. So we can create our class, and I'm going to just call it, for example, article, or you can just say article, so whatever you want. And it extends from db.model. After this, you need to specify the fields that you want. So I want it should be an ID field, db.column, and it is db.integer, and I want the primary key should be true. Now let's create another one that is title, and db.column, and this is db.text, not text. For this we are going to use a string, and we want to specify, for example, 100 character. Let's just copy this. So another one is this is text, and I don't need this 100 in here. Also, we can add a date. So date, db.column, db.datetime, and we can add a default for this. And first we need to import datetime. We can just say import datetime, datetime.now. So now let's create our init method in here. So init, and we are going to add our title and description in here. So this is also not title, but this is description. Okay, or we can just say body. So you can just give, for example, I'm going to just give it body. So body. So we're going to add our title and body in here, and the idea is about to create it. And also we don't need to add the date, because it is it will be added automatically when we create our, for example, our articles. Now let's just say self.title. We want to initialize this, so self.title to title, and self.body to the body. So now we have created our table, but right now this table is not added to our database that we have created, to our Flask database. Now we need to add this, so for that we can just change to the backend, change directory to the backend, and we can just open our Python terminal. And in here the first thing is that you need to, from app, we are going to import db. So after importing the db, and you can just easily say db dot create all. And now let's check this Flask database. You can see that we have a table of articles with the fields of ID, title, body, and also date. Alright guys, now we have created our database and also tables. Now it's time to serialize our data. So for this we have already said that we are using Flask Marshmallow, and it's a library or extension that's used for serialization or deserialization of the data. Now before sending the data to the front end, we need to serialize that. So first we need to import Flask Marshmallow. So from Flask Marshmallow we are going to import Marshmallow, and in here we need to create the object of Marshmallow, and we can pass the app in here. So after doing this we need to create our schema. So in here I can create class article schema, and we can just say marshmallow.schema, and after doing this we can create our class meta. Now we can specify the fields that we want to serialize, so we can just add ID, so title, we have body, and we have date. And after doing this, now let's create our schema object in here. So we can just use article schema, and this is article schema. Now this is for one article. For example, if you want to serialize one article, then we can use this article schema. Now for example, if you want to serialize a query set, for that we need to use money to true. So we can just copy this and paste it in here, and we need to add money to true in here, and let's change this to article schema. So after doing this, now let's create our route. So right now we have just get article route, and we want to create another route that's for adding the article. So right now in here it's just returning a GCD file. Okay, now in here we can just say, let me copy this from here, and we can paste it in this section. This is add, and the method is post, and let's just say diff add article. So we need to import request in here, so we can just say import request, and so let's create the title, and we can just say request.json. We need to pass the title, and we can just copy this one for the body, so body, and this should be body. So after doing this, we need to create the object of our table, class table, so that is class articles. So in here we can just say for example articles, and we can pass the title and also the body in here. After doing this, we need to add this to the database, so we can just say db.session.add, and we want to add the articles, and also we need to commit the database, so db.session.commit, and at the end we can just return post schema. So because it's just one article, so for that we need to just return, not post schema, sorry, article schema. So we can just say article schema dot JSONify, and we can pass our this articles. So now the add article is it's prepared to okay, now I'm going to open my Postman, and in here let's just copy this. Let's create another tab, and we are going to check that we can add something in here or not. Let's just change this to post, and we can grab this. So go to the body, and after the body we want to choose the row, and from here it should be JSON, and this is the title. So this is the title, and we can copy this. We need to add a body or description. We can say this is the body. So now let's just send. Okay, now you can see that we are receiving 200 OK, and we have, this is the body, we have the date, this is the date, this is the ID, and this is the title. And now if we get our this okay, now right now we cannot get because we haven't created the get route till now. So if you see now your database table articles, we have a new data with ID 1 in here. Now we can add another one, so let's just add another one. This is the second title, this is the second body, and we can just send. You can see that the ID 2 is added, and now if we check Flask, so let me just check the articles, you can see that we have another data with the second ID in this section. So this was the adding. Now let's change the get articles, because in here we want to just get the article instead of JSONify. So now we can just say all articles, and we can just say articles dot query dot all. We want to query over all articles, and after doing this we are going to just create results, and we can just add our schema in here. So articles schema, so because this time we are going to use a query set, so for that we need to just use the articles schema, and we can just say dot dump, and we want to add our all articles in here. And after that we can just say return JSONify the results. So now let's just check this, that we can get our 2 articles or not. So this time we can just go to the get. So now if I request the get, so you can see that I am receiving the 2 articles in here with, so this is the first one, then this is the second one. And also if you go to the local host, now you can see that we have the 2 articles in here. Now let's create another route, and that's for getting the specific details of the article according to ID. For right now, if I for example get the first article, and if I send, you'll see that I am receiving error, and you can see that I'm receiving error. So for that we need to create another route in here, and I'm going to just copy this and paste it in here. And so this should be get, and we want to get according to the ID, and the method is get. So now let's just say diff, for example, post details or whatever you want, and we can pass ID in here. And now let's just say post, or we can just say article, so for one article, and we can just say articles dot query dot get. We are going to use get, and we want to get that according to the specific ID. And now we can just return, because it's one, so for that we can just use article schema dot JSONify, and now we can pass the article in here. So now this time if I hit this URL in the postman, you'll see that I'm not receiving any error, and I will receive the first ID article. So now let's just check this. So now let's just send. Now you can see that I'm receiving the first article in here. If I change this to second, and if I send, you can see that I'm receiving the ID2 data. And if I get, you can see that I'm receiving the whole data, so the first ID and the second ID in here. Let's work on our update functionality. So let me just copy this route, and at the bottom we are going to create our update. So we can change this to update. We want to update according to the ID, and the method is put. Okay, now let's create our div update article, and we want to pass the ID. So the first thing is that we need to get the article, and we can just say articles dot query dot get, and we want to get a specific article according to the ID, so we can pass our ID in here. After that we need to get the title and also the body, so we can just say request, so request dot JSON, and this is title, and we want to do the same for the body, so request dot JSON, and this is body. Now we need to set our title and also body, so we can just say article dot title to the title, and article dot body, this should be body. And at the end we need to just commit the database, and we want to return our article schema because it's just one article, so we want to use article schema dot JSONify, and we can pass the article like this. So now let's check this update, and for this let me just copy this from here, and we can create a new tab, and let's just add this in this section, and this should be update, and I want to update the first one. And also let's also copy the data from here. So let me just copy this, or we will change the ID. So we can just go to the body. After that we can choose row, and from here we need to choose JSON. And so let me just remove this ID, because ID and date, so we want it should be just body and title. So body updated and title updated. Now let's just send, and we are receiving error. Let's check that where is the error. Oh, and there is this. It's not get, it is put. Sorry for this. And now let's just send this again. And now you can see that this is the second body updated. And also we have the title. This is also updated. And now if you get this, so you can see updated body and title updated. And also the same will be for the our MySQL database. And if you see, we will see the newly updated data in here. Let's just go to the Flask, and you can see that this is updated. You can see this is updated, and also this is updated. And the last functionality is deleting the data. So now let's create data. I'm going to just copy this, and I can add this in here. So this is delete, and we want to delete according to the ID, and the method is delete. Now let's create article delete, and we want to delete according to the ID. Let's just get the articles, so we can use the articles dot query dot get. We can pass the ID, and now we can just say db dot session dot delete, and we want to delete the article. And at the end we also want to commit, so dot commit, and we can just return post article schema dot JSONify, and we can pass the article, so article, so it is db the article. Now let's just check this URL endpoint in the Postman, and so we can create a new tab, and in the new tab we can just copy this. We want to delete the first one, the first ID. Let's change this to delete, and change this to delete. Now let's just send, and now you can see that we are receiving 200 OK. And now if I get again, you will see that I have just one. You can see that I have just one data with ID 2, and if you see in here, you can see I have one data, and the same will be for the MySQL database, and you'll see that the first data is gone, and that is deleted. Alright guys, now let's install our ElectronJS. Now before installation of ElectronJS, you need to install Node.js. And after installing of the Node.js, now let's talk about the ElectronJS. Now if you see the documentation, it's telling that it is a cross-platform framework, and it's used for building cross-platform desktop apps with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Now if you come down, you can see that apps users love, and there are some apps and softwares that are built in ElectronJS, like for example Visual Studio Code, Facebook Messenger, Twitch, Slack, Figma. Now also you can see that if you can build a website, you can build a desktop app. Electron is a framework for creating native applications with web technologies like JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. It takes care of the hard parts, so you can focus on the core of your application. Now let's talk about installation, that how we can install this. So as I've already said, first you need to have Node.js, and after that the first thing is that we need to just create a package.json, so we can just use npm init. Now I have already opened my Visual Studio Code. Now this is also built in ElectronJS, and this is my backend code that's built in Python Flask. And now in here, first I want to say npm init -y, or yes, we can say. Now it will create the package.json file for us, and you can see that the entry point should be main.js, so we'll talk about this. And after creating of that, we will use this command for the installation of the Electron. And so now you can see that we have our package.json in here, and so you can see that right now this is index.js, but we will change this to main.js. But there is no problem, you can use index.js, but we are going to just change this to the main.js. So now what we want to do is to install Electron, and we can just use this command, and let's just paste this in here, npm install --save dev Electron, and after that hit enter. So it will take some time, and for this we need to just wait. Alright guys, now ElectronJS has been installed, so you can see that this is the latest version, and you can see we have our node modules, and we have our package.json. Let's open this, and in here you can see that we have index.js description. Now if you see the documentation, and it's telling the entry point should be main.js. Now let's create a file in here, and I'm going to just call it main.js. And after creating of this, we want to change this to main.js like this. And also if you see, let me just come down, and you can see finally you want to be able to execute Electron, and the scripts field of your package.json config add a start command like so. So in here in the scripts we can just add this start electron dot. So let's just copy this and add this in here. So start and electron dot. Alright guys, now let's create our window, our first window using ElectronJS. Now if you see, we have our main.js. Now we want to create our main window code in here in the main.js. So first of all, we need to import app and also browser window. And okay, now you can see that it's automatically added, and you can see const app and also browser window require Electron from Electron. And after doing this, let's create our function for creating of the window. So we can just say function create window, and then here the first thing is that we need to create the object of this browser window. So we can just say const main window, and we can just say new browser window. So we can just add this browser window in here, and now we need to pass an object in here. So for example, there are different options that you can pass in here. You can add the width, you can add the height, you can add an icon, you can add, for example, the window should be resizable. For example, we want to give the width, so for example the width should be 800, and the height we want to give it about 600. Okay, now after creating of this create window, now we need to load our file, our HTML file. Now we need to create a new file in here. So first I'm going to create a new folder, so in my root directory. So I'm going to just click on this, and I want to call this src. In the src I'm going to create a new folder, I call it UI, and in the UI let's create a file at it should be index.html. Now this will be our main.index.html that we want to load that in our main.js. Now let's create our HTML in here, so we can just say HTML, and let me just say for example the title Python and ElectronJS, and in the body I want to create just h1 tag, and let's just say hello from, or we can say welcome to ElectronJS and Python Flask. So now let's load this, and here we can load this in this section. So we can just say main window dot load file. So we can just say load file, and we can just say in the source folder we have a UI folder, and in the UI we have our index.html like this. So after loading of the index.html, now we need to run our this GUI application. So right now we have our create window, but we need to call this, we need to run this. So at the bottom in here I'm going to say app.when ready, so when my app is ready, and I can just say .then, and here I'm going to just call my create window. So create window like this. Okay, so now let's run this, that we have our first GUI window in ElectronJS. So you can see that we have used JavaScript and also HTML. Right now we haven't used any CSS, but as we have learned about the ElectronJS, so using ElectronJS we can build GUI applications with HTML, JavaScript and also CSS. Now and here let's just run this. So we can just say npm start, and after that hit enter. So now let's just wait for this, and also remember that for the main.js, if we see our package .json, and here you can see that this is our main.js and this is our main entry point, so you can name it whatever you want. And now you can see that we have our GUI, our GUI app, and we should see this index.html in here. So welcome to ElectronJS. So let's just wait, and now you can see that we have our welcome to ElectronJS and Python Flask. So you can see that we have some menu and also menu items in here. We will remove this, but we want to add our own menu items and also menu bar. So now right now you can see that we have our window in here, so we have minimize, we can maximize the window, and we can close the window, so like this. Alright guys, now let's create our own menu items in ElectronJS. Now right here we can see that we have some menu bars and also menu items, but they're built in here. So for example, sometimes even during this course we are not going to use from the menu items, but it's good to know that how you can create your own menu items or your own menu in ElectronJS. So before that, for example, sometimes you want to open the dev tools, like for example if you're developing any website. So for the opening of the dev tools in ElectronJS, and here you can just say in this section, so main window, and we can say dot web contents, and then here we can just say open dev tools. So now if I run this, let me just run this, and you will see that we have our dev tools with our GUI page. Now you can see that we have our dev tools in here, and like this. Now let's just create our menu and also menu items. So first we need to import menu in here, so we can just say import menu from Electron. And after importing the menu, we can just come down, and here we can create our menu. So we can just say let menu dot build from template, and it is an array of object. So in here we can just give the label. So the label, for example, we want to give the first one file, and in the file we want to add our sub menu, so we can just say sub menu. And so now the first one is for example, we can give the label to get article, and also we can add another one that should be, for example, the label is exit, and also you can add down click even for this, for example, for the exiting or quitting the application. So in here we can just add an on click, or we can just say click, not on click. So click, and we can simply say app.quit. And after that, at the end, you can just in here, so in this section we can say menu dot set application menu, and we can add our menu in here. Now let's just run our ElectronJS app again. So now you can see we have our file in here, so with the get article and also exit. If I click on exit, so you can see the app is exited. Now let's add another menu in here, so we can just say label, and this should be about. So like this you can create. Now if I run this again, npm start, and you will see that I have about also, and you can see that we have about in here. Alright guys, now let's talk about the reloading of our ElectronJS application. So for right now you can see we have our ElectronJS window, our GUI window. But for example, I want to bring some changes in the index.html. So for example, I want to add an h2 tag in here, and let me just say this is ElectronJS course. Now if I save this, you can see that I'm not seeing the changes. I need to close this, and after that I can just run npm start. After that I can see this changes. Now we want to add a reloading functionality. Now you can see that we are seeing this change in here. Now we want to add a reloading functionality. For that you need to install a third package library that's called Electron Reload, and you can just use npm and install Electron Reload. Now after doing this, in our main.js file in here we can just say require, and we can just say Electron Reload, and we can add their name in here like this. Okay, so now let's just first let me just close this once, and let me just save this. Let me run my GUI application again. Okay, now I want to bring change, for example, in the index.html. So I'm going to just open this, and in here let me just close this DevTools, and let's just add an h3 tag. Let's check. Or we can just say, for example, please subscribe my channel, like this. Okay, so right now you can see that we are not seeing. If I save this, so let me just save this, and you can see that we are seeing the changes and there's no problem. For example, let me just add a p tag, hello world, and now if I save this, and you can see that we are seeing hello world in here. So like this you can use reload functionality in the ElectronJS applications. Now let's learn that how we can add Bootstrap styles to our ElectronJS application. So for that, first of all, you need to download some Bootstrap files from the boot swatch. So for example, there are different ones that you can just use it. And for example, we are using this Cosmin here, so you can just click on here, and after that you can just click on bootstrap.main.css and it will be downloaded. So after downloading that, you need to just copy that and bring that in your UI folder, so you can just add that. So this is bootstrap.main.css, so I've already added in here, and after doing that in here, now we can just add this. So we can just say link, and now this is style sheet, and in here we need to add, we can just say bootstrap.main.css. So now if I save this, you can see that we are seeing changes in the text. And now let's just add a button in here. For example, I want to just add a button. I can just say button, and I can just add a class. So the class, for example, btn, I want to use a bootstrap style. So btn, for example, primary. And now let's just save this. Okay, now you can see we are seeing a button, but in here we can just say click me. And now let's just save this, and now you can see that we are seeing a bootstrap button in here. For example, we can just add another one, button, class, btn danger. So for example, delete, and now if you see, we have another button in here. So like this you can add bootstrap styles to your ElectronJS application. Alright guys, now let's learn that how we can insert our data. So we will create our form with two input fields and also a button for inserting the data. Now in our index.html in here, we want to remove these codes from here, and now we can create our main class in here. So we can just say main class, and for the class we want to just give it container Floyd, and after that we are going to create our div class, and we can just say div class, and we can just say row, and after that we are going to create another div class. So we can just say div, and we can say div class, we can just give call md, and so we are going to use row and column like this. We want to give a padding of 4 and also margin y to auto, then y to auto. So now in here we want to create our form. So we can just say form, and we have an action. We are going to remove the action because we don't need the action in here, and we can give a class for this. So for the class we want to use a cart, so we can just say cart body, and also we can add an ID for this because we want to access this form through the JavaScript. And so this is our ID, my form. And now let's create another div class in here, class, and this is form group. Okay, now let's create our first input field. So we want it should be for the title, so we can just say we can create our input in here like this. So the type is text, and we can give an ID for this, so you can just say title, and also we can give a placeholder. We can just say please enter title, and also we can give a class, or even we don't need the class in here, or we can just give a class. So form control, so this is a Bootstrap class. We have already added the Bootstrap in our ElectronJS application. And also we can just say autofocus. So now if I save this, you'll see that now I have please enter title in here. Now we want to create another input field in here, because we want one for the title and also one for the description. Now for the description we are going to use we want to use text area. So in here we can just create a div class, and so we can just say div class, and this is form control. Now let's create our text area. So now for the text area we don't need the name. Let's just remove this. We want the ID. So for the ID, for example, we can just say description, and we are going to remove the column. We need the row, and it should be 10. I think it's good, like this. And also we need to create a button. So button, and the class is beaten success, and we can just say save. So now we have our title, and also this text area is okay. Now text area, we have title, and also we have our save button. Okay, now we have created our form. So we have our title, and also we have our description we can add, and we have a save button. Now we want to just create another JavaScript file. So in the UI we are going to just create a new file, and we are going to just call it app.js. Now what we want to do is to get these input fields from our index.html and our app.js. So right now you can see that we have ID in here. So for the title, and also we have ID for the description. We have this ID, and also we have our button in here. So now in our app.js in here we can just say const my form. So also if you see in our index.html we have an ID for this form. So you can see form class, and we have this ID. Now the ID is my form. Now in here first we want to get that ID, and we can just say const my form document dot get element by ID, and we can add my form in here. Also we want to get the title, so const title, and we can just say document dot get element by ID. Now if you see in our index.html we have ID title in here, so we can just say title. Now let's just copy this, and we want one more for the our description, or we can say body. And if you see our index.html, and if we come down in the text area we have description, and let's add this in here. Okay, so now we can create our const. Now first of all, if you see we have a save button in here, and in this if we see so in here we have a button class btn success, and the value is save, and you can see that we have a save button in this section. And also because we are not going to add any on click for the save button, we want to add that to our form. So in here what we want to do is to add an event listener for the form, and in here we can just say my form. So we have our form in here, and dot add event listener, and we want it should be submit, and also we want to just add an event in here. And okay, now after doing this, and here we want to just say e.prevent default, because we want to we don't want the refreshing for the page, so for that reason we want to just use e.prevent default. And now in here if I say console.log, for example, hello world. Now if I just close this app, so let me just close this, and what I want to do is to just run this application again, because I want my dev tools in here. So in this section I can just say npm start, so okay, now this is not a problem because it's from the Bootstrap. And so right now if I click on this, you can see that we are not seeing this console.log. That's because now we need to add this app.js in our index.html. So we can just come down in our body. So in here we can just say script, and we can add the source in here. So the source is app.js. So now if I save this and if I click on this, so you can see that we are receiving hello world in here. So now what I want in here in my by clicking of the save, I want to insert my data to my backend. Now if you see my backend right now, I don't have any data, and if you see my database, Flask database and articles table, I have ID, title, body and date, but there is no data. So I want to add that through the ElectronJS. Now let's create our method for inserting the data. So in here I can just say const insert data and new data. So I'm going to use fetch in here, so we can just say fetch, and in here we need to add this localhost port 5000. Now if you see our app.py file, we have a route for adding the data. Now let me just come down. So this is my get route, and you can see that I have add route, and it's for posting. Now in here I'm going to just use my add. Now after this we need to pass the method in here. So by default it's get, but we want to post the data, so we can just add post in here. Also we can add headers, so headers, and we can just say content dash type, and it is application slash JSON, like this. And also we need the body, because we want to send the body, and we want to just set JSON.stringify, and we can just pass this new data in here, so like this. Now after doing this, now it will return a promise, so we can just say .then, and we are receiving our response in here, and we can just say response.json. And also we are going to just now in here we will receive our data, and for right now we are going to just say console.log the data, and if there was an error, we can just grab that in the catch block, error, and console.log the error. So now let's just use this insert data in here. So instead of console.log, we can just so now first we need to create so first we need to get the data. So right now if you see, we have our title and also body. First we need to get the value from these input fields, and after that we can just add that to the database. So in here I can just say const new data, and we can say title, and this is title.value, and we have the body, and this is body.value. And after creating of this, now we can just say insert data, and we can pass our new data in here. So now let's just save this. Let me just add the data, so I can just hit this is my new data, this is my new description, and let's just click on the save. So you can see that we are receiving a response in here, and this is my data, and this is the my description, this is the data, and also this is the date. Now if you see our models in here, in the model we have our ID, title, body, and also date. Now the date is it's auto added, and if you see our Python terminal, you can see that we are receiving post, add, and we are receiving 200. It means that we have added the data. Now let's just check get, and we have our first data in here. This is my new description, and this is my title, and also if you see the articles database, articles table, we have a new data in here. So like this you can insert your data. Now let's learn that how we can get our data. So we have added a new data, and you can see that we have already added the data. So now we want to get our data. For this we need to create another div in our index.html. Now in here we can just say div, and we can create our div, and this is class, and the class is col, and we can just say md like this. And after that we want to create another div, so I can just say div id, and we want to give the ID articles. We will need this ID in our app.js file, and now in this section we are going to just get our all data. So for that, what we want to do is to first of all we need to get our this articles in our app.js file, and after that we can get the data. So now let's just open our app.js, and in here we can just say const articles document.get element by ID, and we can just add our articles in here like this. Now we can create another method or function for getting the data. So in here we can just say const get all data. So now let's just use our this fetch. Let me just use it like this, and this time it's not add but it's get. So we have a get route in here, if you see. So get, it's used for getting the data. We are adding get in here, and also you can pass some method, even though it's not necessary to add this in here, but we can just add it. So method is get, and also we can add headers. So let me just copy this from here, and it will return a promise, so we can just grab that in here. So we can just say dot then response resp.json, and dot then we can just say data. So for right now let's just console.log the data. So console.log the data, and we can just add .catch error console.log error. So now let's just call this method, and I'm going to just call it in here like this, and now let's just save this, and we should see the data in here. Yeah, now you can see that we have a data because we have one data and we are seeing the data in here. Now let's just another data in here. So this is our second data, This is our second description. Save. The data is added, and let me just refresh this, and you can see that now we have two data. So this is the first one, and this is the second one. Now, instead of showing that in the console, we want to show that in our ElectronJS application. So for this, if you remember that we have created a div class in our index.html. Now let me just show you. Now we want to render that articles in here. So now we have our const articles in this section. Now we can create another method in here. Let me just say const render articles, and we can just pass my data in here. And first we can just say my articles dot inner HTML. Now we can create a for each in here, so dot. You can also use map, but I'm using for each in here. We can just say data, and now we can say articles dot inner HTML. Now we can concat our data in here. So we are going to use backticks like this. So we can just create a div class, and this should be cart body, and also we can just add margin y to 2. Let's just close this div, and after this let's create an h2 tag in here. So h2, and first we want to just render our data.title. data.title. Now let's just get this copy this render articles, and we want to just, instead of console.log, we want to just add this in here, and also we want to pass the data like this. So now let's just save this. So missing initializer const, we have an error, app.js line 38. So sorry, it's not an arrow function. Let me just say function. You can use a row function, but for this I'm going to just use a regular function. Okay, so now you can see that we have our first title in here. Let me just close this. So this is my new data, and this is our second data. And also we can just make this a little bit bigger, and let me just open the index, the rows. For example, if I make it to 20, and I think it should be good. Oh no, row, we can add a column in here. So let's just add a cols of for example 10 or 20, or even we can just make it 40. 40 is not okay. Now 30 is good, I think, or even 40 is good. We can just see that. Okay, now it's good. So now we have our first data in here, so title, and also for first two title. Let's also render our all data in here. So let me just copy this. I want to just use p tag in here, so p and data.body. And also, if you see, we have a date time field in here. Also, we want to just show this, and let me just copy this, and in the h5 tag, h5, I want to show the date. Now you can see that we are seeing our title, our description, and our date and time. So also we want to create two buttons for every article. For example, one for the editing, and also one for the deleting. So for that, in here we can just create a p tag like this, and so button, we can add a class, and btn, for example, the first one is danger for deleting. Let's just copy this. We want another one for the updating. Update. Okay, now you can see that we have also two buttons in here, one for the deleting and also one for the updating. Now in here, if you see, when we are adding the data, now for example, let me just add a new data. So Python and ElectronJS course, and we can just say let's add a new description in here. And now if I click on the save, you can see that the data is added, but we are not seeing the data in here. And also you can see that the form, we are seeing the data in the form. So first of all, we need to just reset the form after adding the data. Now we can just do that. So if you see, we have my form in here, and if I come down, so after inserting the data, we can just say my form.reset. So reset. Like this. Okay, and also if I save this, now you can see that we will see the data in here. You can see that this is the new data that has been added in here. Now we want to automatically see the data in here when we add the data. So for that, let's just go to the now inserting the data. So in here we don't need this, and we can just call our get all data in here. So get all data. So after inserting, we want to see the data. Okay, so now if I add a new data in here, and this is for testing, this is testing description, and let's just save this, and you can see that the data is now added, and we don't need to refresh our ElectronJS app again. Now let's just add some style for this whole application. So you can see if we add the data, our form is in here. So for this, we are going to create another style.css file in here. So we can just say style.css. So now in here, first we want to just add our body, and we want to just add a background color. And we can just say background, and we can just say dark, for example, or we can just choose a color from here. I think what color should be good? So let me just add this for right now, and we can just add a margin 0 and also a padding of 0. Also let's target our articles over this this ID that we have in here. So articles, and we can just add a height of 100, and also we can add an overflow. So overflow Y to auto. We can just say a padding of 2 pixel, or we can say 3 pixel, and we can add a background, and this color should be good. And also we can target our my form, our main form, and let's just add this background color also in here. Now let's just add this style.css in our index.html, and I can just copy this and paste it in here, and this time we want style.css. Okay, now let's just save this, Now you can see that it's looking good, and we have our title, and we can add a description in here. And let's change this to another color. For example, if I say gray, and it's looking good, but there's no problem. We can just make it green, and this should be, I think, good. Okay, now it's looking good. And now if I add a data, Python, or we can just say Flask and ElectronJS, you can use Electron for building GUI applications. Let's just save, and you can see that we have our new data in here. Now let's learn that how we can delete any specific data. So right now we can insert the data, and we have our all data in here. Now we want to work on our deleting functionality. So for this we can create another function in here. So we can just say const delete data, and we can pass ID in here. And now we want to just use fetch, and let me just copy this and add this in here. And if you see my app.py file, and for deleting we have our delete route in here. So delete, and we want to delete according to the specific ID. So for this, what we want to do is to just change this to backticks like this, and we can just use our delete in here and $ID. And also we need to add the method. So the method is delete, and we can just also, for example, we can add this like this. Okay, so after deleting the data, I want to get my all article back. So I can just say get all data like this. And now let's just add this delete data in our this BT button that we have. So we have already created a BT in danger, and now we want to add an on click. So we can just say on click, and we can add delete data, and in the delete data we want to delete according to the specific ID. So we can just say data.id. So now let's just refresh this. So right now you can see we have these data in here. For example, I want to remove this data, and if I click on the delete, so you can see that the data is deleted. Now I have 3 data, and if I see my backend, we are seeing the data in here. It means that the data is 1, 2, 3 or not deleted. Let me just refresh this again. Okay, now if I click on this Python and React.js course, so for example this data should be deleted. Let me just click on the delete, and now if I just yeah, now you can see that we don't have any data in here. Let's add a new data. This is my new article, and this is my description. Save. Now we have this data in here, and if I refresh this, we have this data in here, and I want to delete this back. I can click on the delete. The data is deleted, and if I check this, you can see that we don't have any data. And if we see our articles table, and we have just 2 data in here. So like this, you can delete your data in ElectronJS. Alright guys, now let's work on our updating functionality. Now there are 2 steps that we want to update our data. Now in the first step we need to populate the data. For example, if we click on the update, we want to just get one article according to the specific ID, and we want to populate, for example, the article and also the description and the input fields. Now if you see our app.py file in the routes, we have a route that is for getting of the post details, for example, a specific article or data according to the specific ID. Now first we will use this, and after that we can update that. So now let's just in here we can just create another method, and we can say const get data by ID, and we can pass ID in here. And now let's just use our fetch, and let me just grab this and add this in here, and like this we can just say, also we can pass the method, for example the method is get, even though by default it's get, but we want to give this, and we can change this to backticks like this, and we want to get the article, but this time we want to just get a specific article according to the specific ID. And so now after doing this, in here it will return a promise, so we can just say .then, and we can just say response and response.json, and also we can just say .then, and let me also just add this headers, even though in the get method there is no problem, but we can just add it in here. Like this. So, and we can just say .then and data. So for right now we want to just say console.log we are seeing the data in here, and we can just say data, and for right now we can just console.log the title when we click on the get data by ID. Now we need to add this in our update button, so we can just grab this and we can come down in here, so we have an update, and let's add an on, or we can copy this from here, and let's add this in this section, and now we can just grab this get data by ID, and we can add this in here, so we have data.id. Okay, now let's just check our ElectronJS application. So now let me save this like this. Okay, now if I click on we are not seeing the update button in here, so on click get data by ID, we should have it like this. Now let's check. Yeah, you can see that we have our, if I click on this, you can see that I'm seeing the title in here, and if I click on this is our second data, you can see this is our second data, and if I, so right now I have just two data. Now instead of showing that in here, I want to show that in the input fields. Now for that we need to create another method, and so we have const get data by ID. So in here I can just say const render one item, and we can pass my data. So now we can just say title dot value to my data dot title, and also we have body dot value to my data dot body, and also we need an ID. We will need an ID, so for that we can just say let article ID, and we are going to create a global variable in here, and we can just say in this section article ID, we can say my data.id, like this. Okay, now we have created our this render one item, and after this, instead of console.log in here, so in get data by ID, we can just say render one item, and we can add our data in here like this. So now if I save this and if I click on this, so you can see we have, this is my new data and this is my new description. If I click on the second update, you can see this is our second data and this is our second description. Now let's update our data, and in here I can just create const update data, and we can pass the article ID in here, and also we can pass my data. We can just use this, or we can grab all of them from here and we can just paste it in this section. And so we want to use our another route that is for updating the data. We can just use this update, and we can pass article ID in here, and also the method is put, and so we have headers dot, then we are receiving also we need to add a body in here. We can just say body and json.stringify, and we can just add my data in here. So dot then response.json and JSON. So right now we can just say console.log the data like this. So let me just check it once more. Update data, article ID, my data, update article ID, method put, there's body json.stringify, response, okay, data. Now after doing this, because we are using just one for example one form, and also one button for inserting and also updating the data. Now for this we need to just check that if we have ID, then we want to update the data, and if we don't have the ID, we want to just insert the data. So let's just come down in here. So in here I'm going to just check if we have article ID. So we can just say article ID. If we have this, we want to update the data, and we can pass the article ID that we have already created and also the new data. And in the else case, we want to just insert the data. So now let's check that it's working or not. For example, I want to update this. Let's click on this and I can just say update it and update it. And if I click on save, so you can see this is the new description updated and also this updated. And if I save this, refresh this, and you can see this is updated and also this is updated. Now instead of console.log, we want to show the updated data. So for that we can just in here we can just say get all data, and we don't need this data back like this. We can just make it like this. So now let's just save it and we can just close this. Okay, so now in here, for example, I want to update my second data, and let's just say we are going to update this, and and this is updated description, and we can just click on this, and you can see we are going to update this, and this is updated description. If we see our here, you can see that this is updated, both the data is updated. And if we see our articles table, this is also updated in here. And let's just test our all functionality. For example, first I want to add a data, and now I'm going to just say testing all functionality. This is the last part of ElectronJS and Python course, and let's just save. We can insert the data like this. We can update the data, so let me just say updated, and this is also updated. We can make it updated, and if I save this, so you can see updated, and also this is also updated, and the last one is deleting. So first let's just check that we have in the get, so we have 3 data in here and these are updated. Now for example, if I click on the delete, so the data is deleted, and if we check this, we don't have any data, and also we will not see any data in here. So like this you can work with Python and ElectronJS, Python Flask and ElectronJS. If you have any question, please let me know. And also if you want to support me, you can support me on my Patreon page. I have added the link in the video description. Also please subscribe to my channel, like and share the video.